Charter California edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest is Lee Baca. He is sheriff for Los Angeles County. And so I think about my cell phone. And if I happen to see something that's suspicious, a picture, a video that I take could be quite valuable, quite a resource for law enforcement. But I have to be honest with you, I'm not sure if I know what to do if I do see something.
Well, I've got something new
coming
on board, and it's called LEADER, L-E-E-D-E-R.
I think it's IR, actually, from what I can see on the notes that you gave me.
Okay.
D-I-R, so it's all good, but keep going.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
So we have two companies, the Amazon Web Services, and the other company is Send Us.
Right.
And it's so robust in its storage capacity that when this goes operational in January, just log on to LEADER, and then you send your photograph or you send your video, and all of this, like in the Boston case, and the LA
Boston Marathon, LAX airport shooting.
That's right. No matter how many photos or videos a person may have or people may have, send it all in, and this robust system, this cloud, will be able to store it all because those clues will lead to solving a crime.
Yeah, and give us a sense. I mean, are they really valuable? Intuitively, it seems like they are, but you know, as the chief law enforcement official, do these count? Do these really help in investigations?
Truly count.
They do.
I mean, let's look at Boston.
Okay.
The two brothers. Totally identified with various forms of photographs and videos. That gave the Boston Police Department a huge advantage in terms of who are we looking for.
It's remarkable to me how technology is really changing the way law enforcement does its work. I mean, in the simplest sense, there are so many more tools that you now have. Give us a sense of some of the tools that you've been using.
Well, here's what we've done. We put a team together to create the radio car of the future. So it's now here.
Batman is here.
Well,
Batman's arrived.
And science does help. So we developed the MDC system. It's a mobile digital center in the radio cars that the deputies have GPS. They have geo-mapping that allows them to know always where they are. Crime data is imposed on the mapping so they know where the concentrations of the crime is. And when you get to the actual tools that are necessary to do the job the right way, laws that are necessarily have to be referred to can be looked at in this machine. Policy, procedures, and even electronic reporting is capable. And then even with a thumbprint, we can find out who somebody is if we have no ID.
And get that information sent instantaneously.
Right back to the system in the radio car.
It is stunning to think the speed with which we are advancing our law enforcement techniques. And when you think about the last recession and how crime numbers went down, which seems counterintuitive, you've taught me that one of the main reasons may have been because of technology, because we have so many more tools at our fingertips that we can combat crime in a more efficient and effective way.
Well, that's very true. And when you look at what's gone on in society for the last 7 or 8 years with Facebook, various forms of blogs, and then you have the internet services at large, people are communicating with each other more. I don't think there's too many secrets anymore. So if you're plotting a crime and everybody has a cell phone and somebody gets a little shaky and then they email somebody about this, before you know it.
I have a friend who works in law enforcement, and he handles background checks for potential employees, and he has told me stories about how even before the interview, they'll look on social media to get a sense of the applicant, and that can lead them to places they never expected.
Well, we monitor it ourselves, and I have a team of people who are analysts in our headquarters information bureau, and we identify rave parties that are being advertised, and those particular parties, as you know, are magnets for a lot of potential harm for people who don't know each other, and drugs are being sold.
Right,
and
literally.
So we're intercepting these by dozens on a monthly basis, and that's because of technology.
And we think about child pornography, how law enforcement's been efficient and effective in meting out some of the bad guys. I know there was recently a bust through the Canadian Royal Army or whoever it was, the law enforcement in Canada. And so there's no doubt technology is changing the face of the way we met out justice. I want to shift gears, if I may, and speak with you about prisons. It's a topic that we address quite often, and it seems as if we have a bit of a reprieve as it relates to the order, the decree by the federal court to decrease the size of the state prison population. I know that you, of course, don't deal with prisons per se, you deal with county jails, but anything that happens on the state prison side impacts county jails because of realignment in AB 109.
Well, that's very true. And I do serve, however, on the board of State and Community Corrections.
Yes, you do.
So yesterday we authorized some money for local county jails to expand with reentry provisions in mind and more, of course, capacity to provide programming. And so we do think that the state is partnering stronger now, and the recession is kind of creeping out of its problems areas, and now we're getting into some potential growth capabilities. But smart justice is what we're really talking about. And people who are given proper programming have a less likelihood of recidivation.
Yeah, let's talk about smart justice, because part of the motivation behind AB 109, yes, it was all but imposed because of federal court orders, but the philosophy behind it was, let's look at how we can better rehabilitate these lower level offenders. And the views had been that if you're serving time closer to home, there are more programs available instead of getting sent to a state prison hundreds of miles away. I know in LA County you've been very bullish on these intervention programs for lower level offenders, or all offenders for that matter. So are we starting to really see the benefits of smart justice, especially as it relates to AB 109?
Yes, in Los Angeles County, for example, we've studied our first releases in terms of a year of freedom on the street, wherever, home, so forth. And we have found that 35% recidivate. So it's like 1 in 3 will recidivate.
But I gotta say that is a huge spike in the right direction.
That's correct.
I mean, if you think about it, recidivism in California has been amongst the highest in the nation at around 70%. So you've cut that in half.
Yes, and what's interesting is that the repeat offenses are much lower level in terms of its seriousness. For example, a good, strong majority are for drug usage. So that part we can't seem to get a handle on as easily, but no doubt about it, when it comes to this hardcore, serious type crimes, we're doing better.
So why do you think you saw this reverse spike, this drop in terms of recidivism?
I think because the incarcerated 109 inmates are local, they have more contact with their families. We have the programming in the jail, 7,500 are there in terms of classes. Most of the people in jails dropped out of school.
But why is it that this message isn't getting out? Because all we really hear is, oh, here's an AB 109er who committed this heinous act and that heinous act. And I mean, are the statistics as you say, and it's just we don't report on good news?
Well, I think that what's happening is that it's creeping out slowly because Los Angeles County is in the lead of this. 7,500 people are in classes, 3 charter schools, 3 tattoo removal machines.
Wow.
All that's working, but it's the socialization process. People who commit crimes need to re-socialize themselves and set stronger standards for themselves.
Are you speaking with your counterparts in other counties, be it in Southern California, Central, Northern California? Because clearly, look, this is Los Angeles County, largest county, 10 million people. You know, you can set the standard.
We're speaking abroad the country, throughout the entire nation. We're speaking to other nations when they want to come and visit us, and we get visits every week.
But what about our the fellow counties? Because look, I mean, we don't have borders between LA and Orange County. So if it's working in LA County, can it work in Orange?
But my colleagues that are the other 57 county sheriffs are actively pursuing these programs as well. And that's what this money yesterday was about.
Very good news. Okay, his name is Lee Baca. He is the sheriff for Los Angeles County. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Sniff, he is the sheriff for Riverside County. And sir, I want to speak with you before we talk about realignment about a recent event that you had to honor your new sheriffs, deputy sheriffs.
Well, we graduated recently a class of 41 new deputy sheriffs after a 6-month-long academy. And then I spend about an hour and a half with them the next morning during part of a 6-day orientation where we actually migrate them from the schoolhouse into the department. And so eyeball to eyeball, I'm able to talk about job expectations, ethics, integrity, and those sort of things.
But it must be very gratifying to know that you have the ability to bring on new men and women into your department, that they want to serve this county with dignity and honor, and that there's hope for them, and there's really great job opportunities.
Absolutely, and for your viewers out there, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, at the direction of the Board of Supervisors, is expanding massively. So we're also increasing our patrol unincorporated area staffing levels.
Right.
And at the same time, we've been dealing with growing the jails.
And let's talk about that, because I'm sure many of these new deputies will be assigned to jail duty. Thank you so much. You sent me an article issued by the Stanford Criminal Justice Center out of Stanford Law School. Very enlightening, very, very enlightening. And what this article looked at was public safety realignment. And at this stage in the game, about 2 years out, how is it doing? And I really appreciated this article's candor and its lack of partisanship. And it basically said, not bad, some problems, but it's not all gloomy and it's not all rosy. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so, and it's not from either party on either end of the spectrum on this. It's an independent academic look at the entire process and how far along we are and some of the challenges we got.
And I do want to talk about those challenges and focus specifically on your job as really the chief jailer. I mean, people may not even realize it, but the sheriff's department, that is the entity that runs the county jails.
Right. By law in California, the sheriff is charged with responsibility for dealing with the unincorporated area patrol, has to own, operate, and maintain a jail system that serves not only the sheriff's office, but every agency that makes an arrest inside the county jurisdiction.
So police departments.
Right. Police departments utilize the county jail system. Some police departments will have short-term lockups, but the county jail is a responsibility by law to each of the 58 sheriffs in California.
I want to talk about crime statistics. This article was very specific. You know, it's so hard to get adequate and accurate crime statistics. And what this article indicated is that there has been an uptick in property crime and violent crime over the last 2 years. Now, the big question becomes why? Is it AB 109? Is it that we've come out of recession and people aren't as depressed and so they're going out and committing crimes? Is it that we've had layoffs, you know, early on in those 2 years? What's your sense about this small uptick after a decrease during the recession of all times?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. And the reality is, the bad news is in 2012, calendar 2012, here in Riverside County, we saw a huge uptick. Every agency saw an uptick, quite a jump. And many people were kind of anxious to jump on the back of AB 109. I think there's partial truth to that. But more interestingly, and I came from a meeting just recently with the other police chiefs and so on, and certainly from the Sheriff's Department perspective, in 2013, now the year isn't closed out yet, but so far we're actually seeing we're holding even or actually making some pretty good drops in violent crime.
Why?
Well, we're not quite understanding why, and we're not going to count those chickens till they're hatched until the actual end of the year. But so far we look like we're doing pretty good. Part of that is the increase in staffing levels that some of us are sustaining. And part of it is, I think, some of the positive features. There are still negative features, but some of the positive features of AB 109.
Which are, in your
mind? Which are breaking the cycle of recidivism.
How?
Well, part of the thing is that we deal with reentry programs now, largely through the probation department, not the sheriff's office. But even the sheriff's jail system has a lot of mechanisms to end up changing behavior. Substance abuse counseling, anger management, teaching some life skills. And that's all part of why we're growing the jail system.
And I want to ask about the jails because I was most fascinated by another portion of this study. And when realignment was put into play, the way that the decisions are made about whether a individual convicted goes to state prison or county jail is the type of crime committed, not the length of sentence. The intent may have been that for 3 years and under, county
Right.
jail, 3 years and more, state prison. But because of the way the law was written, it's you specifically. I mean, in this article, it mentions that in Riverside, there's someone serving, is it 12 years, sir?
Yeah, in the first week, we had one sentenced to 14 years and 4 months.
Right.
LA County just recently had one sentenced to 42 years.
Exactly. And so that does seem to be an area where maybe we need some legislative fixes. I believe former Senator Emerson, he recently resigned, had proposed that. It didn't make it.
Right.
But could we see that resolve itself?
I think we will. I do not see that in the near term, largely
Really?
because of the other issues you and I have talked about, and that's the collision of the state prison system with the 3-judge panel.
Right.
And the reality is that battle is to get them back to 100% being filled, because they're overfilled right now and overcrowded. And so the bigger problem for all of us in California is if they don't continue to add additional prison space, we could very well see a realignment too, with really more serious offenders having to end up being incarcerated locally.
Now, I want to be very clear for our viewers. Prisons are state, jails are county.
Right.
I understand that there is some money coming down from the state for jail construction.
Yes.
And is Riverside one of the beneficiaries?
Yes. In fact, a couple of years ago, your viewers are probably well aware of, or should be aware of, that the Sheriff's Department pursued a $100 million grant from the state as part of AB 109. And we end up, that money now is programmed into the system, and we'll expand our Indio jail. It will not be ready till 2017.
Why so long?
Because it takes a while to end up getting that design.
That simple.
The existing jail there is about 350 beds, and rather than adding onto it like a Frankenstein monster, it'll actually be raised in a brand new facility be built up in its ashes.
How many beds?
It'll be about 1,500 beds altogether, so it'll be one of the bigger ones. So it's a big one, and a lot of construction, a lot of movement of courts and DA's offices, and a lot of stuff.
What about, I know it's not your area, but what about prison construction, state prison construction?
There really has not been any other than dealing with some medical issues and mental health.
Right.
But until they get additional capacity, we're going to be bumping up against this block wall. One other point on Riverside County's jails. Right now, to this minute, we've already applied for $1022.
Which means?
About $80 million under another bill for jail construction here in California, because we're one of the larger counties. $80 million is the max that you can ask for. But that jail will be expanded right now, currently in Banning, by a considerable number of beds. The exact number will be a political debate back and forth between myself and the Well, we'll know whether we get that grant sometime in January or February.
Oh, wow. So this is around the corner.
But there's a very good chance Riverside County, because of our dire needs of being so overcrowded.
Now, what's so interesting is we're so focused on the 3-judge panel that is really all but overseeing the state prison system because of the Supreme Court order. Yet this article tells us 37 of 58 county jails are operating under their own self-imposed cap or court-ordered cap, Riverside being one of them. And what's even more daunting for folks like yourself is the Prison Law Project, which sued the state and got their order from the Supreme Court, is now suing counties for cruel and unusual punishment, including Riverside.
Yeah, and we're actually more vulnerable to those type of suits because the jails were never designed to be long-term storage facilities. And the reality, as I've explained to you before, is that county jails are different than prisons. Prisons are 100% convicted. They go for a long period of time, the more serious offenses. County jails have everything from the simple shoplifter and vandal all the way up to murder cases.
Until they get convicted.
Until they get convicted. But half the inmates at any given time in a county jail are awaiting trial. They haven't been convicted of anything. And that's why constitutional issues are so much more sensitive and acute for county jail systems.
Because you don't really have the medical systems in place.
And they haven't been found guilty of anything. They're awaiting trial.
Right. So what do you do?
Well, you end up protecting those constitutional rights, and particularly on emergency medical health care and mental health care are absolutely critical in county jail systems.
And in Riverside, there's a dearth of doctors, so that's a whole
Not only that, but if you remember a few years ago during budget battles, they actually reduced the county jails' medical services and mental health and almost shut down our county jails.
I wish you the best of luck. He's Stan Sniff. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're now speaking with Paul Zellerbach. He's the DA for Riverside County. We'll speak with you, sir, about realignment in a moment. We just spoke with Mr. Sniff about it. I want to speak with you about real estate fraud, though. To me, that's one of the most violative out there, because your home is your castle. And to think that there are people out there that are preying on folks in their time of just complete misery, and yet you see it all the time.
I do see it all the time, unfortunately, and we know that Riverside County and the Inland Empire have been some of the hardest hit areas in the nation with respect to foreclosures. And so, again, that lends itself to a lot of predatory practices with innocent victims.
And the predatory practices aren't so much focused upon the mortgage brokers that did their shenanigans, and we know what happened there with JP Morgan recently settling for $13 billion. You're focused on, as I understand it, folks that pretend to offer assistance when they're in a foreclosure crisis. Am I right?
That's a big part of it,
right?
Because people are very vulnerable, and someone comes to them and says, we can refinance your mortgage, save your house, just pay us this money. And they pay them the money because they're desperate, and then get no service.
Or just sign this document and you'll be protected, and they just signed over the deed to the house.
They did, and again, there's many forms that this insidious type of conduct can take, and that's yet another one.
So talk to us about what your office is doing, as an example of many DA's offices in the region, to try to combat this type of real estate fraud.
We have a specific real estate fraud unit in the DA's office where we have investigators. We just hired a document examiner. We're going to hire a forensic accountant. We have prosecutors from the real estate industry who've come in to prosecute these types of cases for us. And what we're doing this year is now we're going to regionalize. It was all centered in Riverside. Now we're going to go out to the Southwest County and to the Coachella Valley and have our real estate fraud units in those areas as well.
This is for real.
It is for real. We've also set up a website where people can go online and fill out a real estate fraud complaint form in both English or Spanish. That form comes directly to us and we review it. Matter of fact, this past year we've received over 2,500 real estate fraud complaints.
And what percentage of those would you say raised eyebrows?
Of the 2,500 we've received this past year, we've opened up about 100 active investigations.
That's for real. I mean, that's 100 people who could have their home saved.
No question.
Can you unwind these transactions once they've been done by the bad guys?
It's possible. It depends on what stage they're in, but it's possible. We'll go to the mortgage lender or the bank, and tell them about the fraud, and sometimes they will allow the homeowner to stay there.
If it smells, is it likely rotten?
You bet. And we just started radio ads, as a matter of fact, throughout the county, again in English and Spanish, telling people to beware of these types of practices, giving them our website. Now we have a 1-800 toll-free call number that people can call in, and if it hit the nail on the head, Brad. If it smells bad, it probably is.
Right. What can we do? The website, the 800 number, and just keep our antennas up?
Keep our antennas up, but we need to do more outreach and education. And that's one thing our office is also doing. We're going to senior centers throughout the county. We're working with the Fair Housing Council and doing educational forums for homeowners. So
I want to talk about the bad guys and what happens to the bad guys if they do commit real estate fraud or any other fraud. Hopefully you'd think they'd go to jail or prison.
Correct.
And that's the question when we talk about realignment. We just spoke with Stan Sniff, your colleague who's the sheriff of Riverside County, as well as Lee Baca, who's the sheriff in Los Angeles County. I mentioned to Mr. Sniff, I read this article he provided from the Stanford Law School. It is just outstanding. It talks about whether realignment is working or not, and it doesn't take a Pollyanna view or an overly pessimistic view. It kind of sets forth the facts. What's your sense? I understand you looked at this as well.
I've read it numerous times. But what Stanford University did is they went out and interviewed defense attorneys, judges, probation officers, prosecutors, so they got a well-rounded view of what's happening with respect to realignment over the past 2 years. And I agree. I think it's a pretty fair analysis of where we're at right now.
I want to ask you one specific question, and it deals with crime. We've been speaking for several years now about crime trends and in what direction they're heading. And I always expressed my complete dismay. I was incredulous that crime was dropping during the recession. And we were trying to figure out why. Was it technology? Was it people who were too depressed to go out and commit crimes? But what this study suggests, and I'm going to take it for its word, is that we have seen an uptick in violent crime, as well as in one other area, I believe. Property crime. Thank you, sir. Since realignment. But that begs the question. Have we seen an uptick because of realignment, or because people are less depressed, so they're going out because the economy is turning around? Or is it because of layoffs that may have happened in law enforcement?
Well, the Stanford study talks about the state of California.
Right.
I really am more familiar with Riverside County experience, and part of the problem in Riverside County is not only issues related to realignment, but also our jail overcrowding problem and having to early release thousands upon thousands of inmates who should still be in custody, who reoffend.
And I want to be very clear on what early release means, because it really, in some ways, that can be so misinterpreted. The prison system, for the, quote, most serious, they have not been early released.
No one has been early released from prison.
Right.
We're talking about our county jails throughout Riverside County, and San Bernardino's experiencing the same thing.
They are. Most counties are. At the same time, what was so interesting to me about this article as well is that intuitively one would expect that if you are a criminal defendant and you're entering into plea negotiations, you would try to get the shortest sentence possible, and hope that maybe you can see a probation at the end of that shorter sentence. But because of realignment, what these defendants are now doing is they want their full sentences, because they now understand if they're lower level offenders, they'll get out early.
Well, that's what the Stanford study talks about.
Exactly, and there's no tail.
That's correct.
Explain.
And that's why I'm a big proponent of when someone gets out of custody, we knew when someone was in prison, they get released, they'd be on parole.
Right.
With respect to those felons that are now going to county jail, there is no probation supervision once they're released. And that's why we need to split that sentence and give them some probation supervision with terms and conditions. So they're drug testing, they're going to programs, they're doing
So we've talked about this. Can you mandate that? I mean, I know you're not a judge anymore, but how can you make sure there's that tail?
My attorneys can ensure it by way of plea negotiations, and judges can ensure it by way of imposing those types of split sentences at the time that they sentence.
So what's happening in Riverside County as an example?
Riverside County is one of the top 5 counties in the state of California wherein the prosecutors and the judges appreciate and understand the necessity to have these people on supervised release, and we're leading the state.
And what was so interesting is even in this article, the public defenders were advocating in favor of tails.
Correct, because they see that as the best opportunity to get that individual to become a law-abiding citizen.
We also have seen through this article that some of these, one of the goals behind realignment was if folks serve their time closer to home, they'll have more opportunities to participate in programs that will help them re-enter society. And this article suggests that there is some positive evidence that those programs are working.
And I've been a firm believer of that. I think our local probation officers can do a better job of supervising these folks than the state parole officers were doing, because they have a better experience with the local environment that these people are going to be released back into.
The final area I want to speak about, and it's one that you have been obviously prescient on, is the question of lengths of sentences. Because within the last year, we spoke about your sponsorship of a bill, I believe now former Senator Bill Emerson sponsored it. Very sad about that, but that's another conversation. And it was to whether someone would serve time in the county jail, county jail or state prison would be determined not on their offense, but on the length of sentence.
Correct. And that's what the Stanford study also recognized. And I was appreciative that they bought into my thought in that regard. But we're coming back in January before the state legislature for them to reconsider this bill. It says that anyone sentenced to more than 3 years, regardless of the nature of their crime, they belong in state prison, not in county jail. And what's interesting, if you ask the offenders where they'd rather spend those sentences, 99% of them would say, I'd rather go back to prison.
Which is stunning to think about.
It's sad.
It's because county jails are just not equipped.
Correct.
I mean, they never were intended to be equipped.
They were designed and built and constructed for short-term housing.
Okay, his name is Paul Zellerbach. He is the DA for Riverside County. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.